Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari. Yasoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari. Yasoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari. Yasoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Kishore Kishori ki jai, Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Maharani ki jai, Gonitai ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So this morning we're reading from Canto 10, chapter 87 and text 18. Udaram upasate yarishi atmasu kurpadrisha. Parisara padatim hirdayam arunayo daharam. Tata udagad ananta tavadama shira paramam. Punarhayat sametyana patami kritanta. Sorry, okay, I left out. Udaram upasate yari shivatmasu kurpadrisha. Parishara padhatim hirdayam anunayo paharam. Tate udagad ananta tavadamashira paramam. Punarihayat sametyana patanti kritanta mukhe. Udaram upasate yari shivatmasu kurpedrisha. Parisara padatim hirdayam arunayo daharam. Tata udagad ananta tavadama shira paramam. Punarhayat sametyana patanti kritanta mukhe. Please chant. Udaram upasate yari shivatmasu kurpadrisha. Parishara padhatim hirdayam arunayo daharam. Tata Utagatanam Satavadama Shira Paramam Punarihayat Sametyana Patanti Kritansa Mukhe Udaram Upasate Yarishivatmasu Kurpadrisha Sarapadatim Hridayam Marunayodaharam Tata Udagatanantata Vadama Shira Paramam Unarihayat Sametyane Patanti Kritansa Mukhe. Thank you very much. The word for word. Udaram, the abdomen. Upasate, worship. Ye, who, rishi, of sages. Vatmasu, according to the standard methods. Kurpa, gross. Trisha, their vision. Parishara, from which all the pranic channels emanate. Paridatim, Padhatim, the mode. Hridayam, the heart. Arunaya, the Runi sages. Daharam, subtle. Tata, thence. Udagat, the soul, rises up. Ananta, O unlimited Lord. Tava, your. Dharma, place of appearance. Shira, to the head. Paramam, the highest destination. Puna, again. Iha, into this world. Yat, which. Sametya, reaching. Na patanti, they do not fall down. Krita, anta, of death. Mukhe, into the mouth. And the translation is BBT translation. Among the followers of the methods set forth by great sages, those with less refined vision worship the Supreme as present in the region of the abdomen, while the Arunis worship him as present in the heart, in the subtle center from which all the pranic channels emanate. From there, O unlimited Lord, these worshippers raise their consciousness upward to the top of the head, where they can perceive you directly. In passing through the top of the head towards the supreme destination, they reach that space from which they will never again fall to this world into the mouth of death. In the BBT purport. Here, the Shrutis who teach meditational yoga glorify the personality of Godhead. The various processes of yoga are for the most part gradual and full of opportunities for distraction. Authentic methods of yoga, nonetheless, all aim at meditation on the supersoul, Paramatma, whose primary residence is in the region of the heart, alongside the Jiva soul. This manifestation of Paramatma in the heart is very subtle and difficult to perceive, Daharam, and thus only advanced yogis can realize him there. Neophyte meditators often practice focusing on the supersoul's secondary presence in one of the lower centers of vital energy, such as the Muladhara chakra at the base of the spine, the Svadhisthana chakra in the area of the navel, or the Manipura chakra in the abdomen. Lord Krishna refers to his expansion as Paramatma in the abdominal chakra as follows. Aham Vaishvanaro Bhutva Praninam Deham Ashtita Pranapana Samayukta Pachami Anam Chaturvidam. And this is Bhagavad Gita 15:14. I'm the fire of digestion in the bodies of all living entities, and I join with the air of life, outgoing and incoming, to digest the four kinds of food. That was the translation. Lord Vaishvanara presides over digestion and in general bestows the capacity of mobility on animals, humans, and demigods. In the judgment of the Shrutis speaking this verse, those who limit their meditation to this form of the Lord are less intelligent. Kurpa Drisha, meaning literally having eyes clouded by dust. The superior yogis, known as Arunis, on the other hand, worship the super soul in his form as the indwelling companion of the jiva in the heart, the Lord who endows his dependent with the power of knowledge and inspires him with all varieties of practical intelligence. And just as the physical heart is the center of blood circulation, so the subtle heart chakra is the crossroads of numerous channels of prana called nadis, which extend outward to all parts of the body. When these passageways have been sufficiently purified, the Aruni yogis can leave the heart region and go upward to the chakra at the roof of the brain. Yogis who leave their bodies through this chakra, the Brahma Randra, go directly to the kingdom of God, from which they need never return to be reborn. Thus, even the unsure process of meditational yoga can bear the fruit of pure devotion if it is followed perfectly. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur cites several Shruti mantras that echo the words of this verse. Udaram Brahmeti Sakara Ksha Upasate Hridayam Brahmeti Arunayo Brahma Haivaita Ita Urdvam Tvevo Dasarpat Takohiro Shrayate. The translation for this verse from that Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur is quoting, those whose vision is clouded identify Brahman with the abdomen, while the Arunis worship Brahman in the heart. One who is truly Brahman realized travels upwards from the heart to take shelter of the Lord, who is manifested at the top of the head. Shatam Chaika Chahirdayasya Nadyas Tassam Murthanam Abhinithirtaika Tayorthavam Ayan Amritatvam Eti Vishwan Anya Utskramane Bhavanti. The translation for that, which is coming from the Chandogya Upanishad 8:6:6. There are 101 subtle pranic channels emanating from the heart. One of these, the Shushumna, extends to the top of the head. By passing up through this channel, one transcends death. The other channels lead in all directions to various kinds of rebirth. The Upanishads refer repeatedly to the indwelling Paramatma. Sri Svetashvatara Upanishad 3:12-13 describes him as follows. Mahan Prabhurva Purusha Satvasya Yaisa Pravartaka Su Nirmalam Imam Praptim Ishano Jyotir Avyaya Angusta Matra Purusho Nitar Atma Sada Gyananam Hridaya Sannivishta Hirda Manisha Manasabhikipto Yats Stat Yidur Amritas Te Bhavanti. And the translation for that is as follows. The Supreme Personality of Godhead becomes the Purusha to initiate the expansion of his cosmos. He is the perfectly pure goal that yogis strive to reach, the effulgent and infallible ultimate controller. Measuring the size of a thumb, the Purusha is always present as the supersoul within the heart of all living beings. By exercising proper intelligence, one can realize him within the heart. Those who learn this method will gain immortality. Close quote. In conclusion, Srila Sridhar Swami prays, Udaradishu yan purnsam chintito muni yatmabi hanti mrityu bayan devo hirt gatam tam upasmahe. The translation for that. Let us worship the Supreme Lord who resides in the heart. When mortal beings think of him by the standard procedures established by great sages meditating upon him in his expansions in the abdomen and other regions of the body, the Lord reciprocates by destroying all fear of death. Om Jnanatimirandasya Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshura Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manopistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Svam Rupa Gadamayam Dadati Swapadanti Kam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Uta Padakamlam Shri Guru Vaishnavam Shah Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Ragutam Vitam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishaka Vitam Shah. Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandho Jagat Pate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gorangi Radha Vrindavaneshwari Vishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Panchakalpa Tsurivyas Chakripa Sindhuve Vachapatitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnebhyo Namo Namaha Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Shrimati Ramapada Swami Iti Namine Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Iti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So I'll read the verse one more time because this is one of the or several of the Shrutis talking the ones that deal with this particular topic. So I'll just read the translation of the verse again. Among the followers of the methods set forth by great sages, those with less refined vision worship the Supreme as present in the region of the abdomen, while the Arunis worship him as present in the heart, in the subtle center from which all the pranic channels emanate. From there, O unlimited Lord, these worshippers raise their consciousness upward to the top of the head, where they can perceive you directly. Then, passing through the top of the head towards the supreme destination, they reach that place from which they will never again fall to this world into the mouth of death. So I looked at two commentaries, Srila Jiva Goswami and Srila Vishwanath. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur is quoted quite extensively in this BBT purport. But anyway, we'll go through it because it's rather fascinating. Srila Jiva Goswami, that's in the Kramasandarbha, his commentary on the Srimad Bhagavatam, when he's commenting on this text, he notes this particular point. This is what he says. Among all the agreeing Shrutis, others which were not clearly recognized as important by them show their allegiance to them. So there's a kind of continuity. They're all working together. The Shrutis are the kind of personified Vedas, and they're actually speaking. So the way this allegiance is shown, so in this particular text, it's that when the previous Shrutis stop speaking, the Shrutis that teach Krama Mukti, which is this verse, the gradual elevation through yoga, they begin to praise the Lord. So it's been a little switch. The previous Shrutis were focusing on bhakti, or at least direct worship of the Supreme Lord. And here there's a switch. The Shrutis, they're referred to here by Srila Jiva Goswami, others who were not clearly recognized. So now they're making their appearance in support of the previous Shrutis, but from their angle. So the present verse speaks about yoga with the object of worship being Paramatma. Whereas the previous two verses, 16 and 17, they speak about bhakti with the object of worship being Bhagavan for the devotee. So little shift has happened. But it's seen as support for what has come previously. So this text 18, it states, and this is Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur putting it in words of the Shrutis, and this is how he words what they're communicating. Therefore, O Master of the three worlds, the wise get rid of all misery by diving deep into the nectarian ocean of topics about you, which washes away all the contamination of the universe. So that was the previous text 16. So notice the emphasis is directly on addressing the Supreme Lord. He's the master of the three worlds. The wise get rid of all their misery by diving into the nectarian ocean of topics about him. Then text 17, only if they become your faithful followers are those who breathe actually alive. Otherwise, their breathing is like that of a bellows. So, the two previous texts are directly addressing the Supreme Lord and giving the effect on humans who are turning their attention to him or failing to turn their attention to him. I mean, not even though they appear to be breathing, they're not actually alive if they haven't turned their attention to the Supreme Lord. That was the previous text. So here, in the text that we're looking at today, where the Shrutis are switching their attention to worship of Paramatma, the beginning word of the text is analyzed by Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. And that particular word, that the first word in the text that we read today, which was quite long lines, each of the lines, the first word was udaram, which is translated as abdomen. And Srila Vishwanath says that this word refers to the Paramatma in the form of Lord Vaishvanara. So he's situated, Lord Vaishvanara is situated in the stomach region. So that's where Lord Vaishvanara is, right there. And he bestows the energy for activity in that area. So any activity that goes on in the stomach area, it's due to the kind intervention of Lord Vaishvanara. So we're quite oblivious unless we have a problem. Then we become aware of, the Lord Vaishvanara is not helping here. So, because he's the one who bestows the energy for activity in the stomach area. And the word that's used is he gives Kriya Shakti. So he gives that energy for what's happening in the stomach. So first one can consider the super soul or Paramatma, who is described or defined by Lord Krishna. And this is how Lord Krishna defines, because remember, these Shrutis have shifted their focus to Paramatma. So we're going to get there. So I'm going to first look at what Lord Krishna says about Paramatma. And this is how Lord Krishna describes in Bhagavad Gita 15:23. He says, "Yet in this body there is another, a transcendental enjoyer, who is the Lord, the supreme proprietor, who exists as the overseer and permitter, and who is known as Super Soul." So we just heard about Lord Vaishvanara giving that Kriya Shakti in the stomach, and this is Krishna describing what Paramatma does. He's actually overseeing everything. He's a transcendental enjoyer. So he's not enjoying what's going on in the body. It's not like that. He's a transcendental enjoyer in that he's understanding all the particular activities of the living entity. And he's also the one who's giving the permission for any of the actions performed by the individual soul residing within the body. So that's Lord Krishna giving the description of Paramatma. So that Paramatma is the Supreme Lord. He's actually residing in the body, and he's present within to sanction the individual soul desiring some enjoyment. So he's permitting. So we have that desire. We want to enjoy this. Like myself, like I find myself thinking, oh, I'm going to compose an outfit. So these kind of pants will go with that kind of coat. The color combination is good. So I may be thinking like that. So it's actually Super Soul who's going to sanction whether I actually get to have that outfit or not, and whether I'm going to be able to acquire it, whether I'm actually going to be able to physically put it together. So, he's going to permit, because all kinds of arrangements have to be made. There has to be going out to purchase it, or clicking on the internet to purchase something. It's going to have to travel a long distance. Somebody over there is going to have to pack it. If it's done from a far distance, going to have to pack it. Then somebody's going to have to transport it, the UPS, bring it to my door. I'm going to have to go down the stairs, pick up the box, and then I'll have the outfit assembled. But the entity who's permitting all that is the Supreme Lord present in the heart. He's allowing for me to go through that thinking process, going through the actions, somebody else going through the actions on their part, whether it's the boxing or the transporting. So what he's actually permitting is that desire for enjoyment. Because for me, it's enjoyment to put an outfit together. He's actually permitting that desire for enjoyment by allowing me to go through the thinking process, performing particular actions that allow for the acquisition of that item. So, in fact, Srila Prabhupada states it this way. He says, without the sanction of the Supreme Soul, the individual soul cannot do anything. So if I were not permitted to go through that action of, doing the research, finding the right color, the right shape, nothing could happen. It is sanctioned by the Supreme Lord within. He's permitting that action to be performed. So the individual is defined as bhukta, meaning he's been sustained, because it's a sustenance that one's getting. You know, you have that desire for some enjoyment, so you need sustenance to fulfill that enjoyment, that desire for enjoyment. You need that sustenance. And the Lord is the Bokta, is the term used, which means that he's the maintainer. He maintains one. He allows for that. So in this slide, there's a description in the Srimad Bhagavatam, because we're going to go and look at how all this takes place, like right from the beginning. So in Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 6, there's a description of how the Supreme Lord, as the super soul of all demigods, he's entrusted with the task, because one of the demigods, Lord Vaishvanara, is right there in the stomach area giving that Kriya Shakti. And so we're going to hear how the Supreme Lord, as the super soul of all the demigods, because just like I've been describing that he's permitting all activities in humans, using myself as an example, there's also, he's the super soul of all the demigods as well. So the demigods are entrusted with the task of constructing the cosmos. And so for this purpose, the Supreme Lord manifests a gigantic form for their understanding. So he's also assisting the demigods because they've got much higher intelligence than humans. So he actually manifests this gigantic form for their understanding. So a gigantic universe develops gradually, and it's just as the body of a child develops within the womb. It's very gradual. Like you find mothers go and get scans, and you know they get so excited because now they see that the limbs are beginning to form and the hands are beginning to form, etc. The face is getting features. So it's very gradual, the development of a body. So in the same way, the development of a universe is very gradual. That's how it's described in the Srimad Bhagavatam. So the understanding is that any material object that shows some development, like there's this example of like a little child in a womb, could be an animal in the womb of an animal body. So if some material object, because it's still considered a material object because it's made of material elements, the body, if it shows some development, then it has to have a spiritual soul within, because it's a soul that animates. So for this reason, transcendence enters within the universe. So you've got material elements. If it's a huge universe, you know, with earth and fire and water, etc., with all the particular living entities, for there to be life, this is how it's put, transcendence has to enter within the universe. And there's a discussion in this third canto between Vidura and Maitreya. And Maitreya explains that the Supreme Lord, he expands himself into the diverse forms of the demigods. So he's actually expanding himself to form the bodies of the demigods after he's manifested the gigantic universal form. So an example is given like this. When the Lord's two nostrils perfectly manifested themselves, the Ashvini Kumaras entered there in their proper positions. And because of this, the living entities can smell the aromas of everything. So going back to the origin, how is it that we are able to smell everything? So in this discussion between Maitreya and Vidura, there's the you could say the breathing of the gigantic form of the Lord. So when those two nostrils develop, that's when he's also manifesting the demigods that are responsible for that capacity to smell. So in this case, it's the Ashvini Kumaras. They enter that particular, the nostrils of the Lord as the demigods. And it's because of them and their work that humans who get given a nose are able to smell. Because remember, it's always every capacity is permitted by the Supreme Lord who's residing within the heart. So there's a demigod who's responsible for allowing a particular sense to work too. And this all traces back to their entering when a particular sense organ, so to speak, manifests itself in the gigantic body of the Lord. This is how he's arranged it. So there's another description. I'm going to read three of them because I think it's quite extraordinary. I mean, one really has to expand one's capacity to think because we have such a teeny world. We can't see beyond our small world. So reading the Srimad Bhagavatam, it really expands your intelligence. So there's this description. Thereafter, the two eyes of the gigantic form of the Lord were separately manifested. The sun, the director of light, entered them with the partial representation of eyesight. So the sun is responsible for giving that strength to see. Like in Ayurveda, there's this recommendation, like if your eyesight's failing a little bit, you can sit in front of a ghee lamp that's been offered and study the flame without blinking. And why is that? Because there's light and fire, which is actually strengthening the eyes. So in the same way, it was the sun who entered into the eyes separately that belonged to the universal form of the Lord. And there's also, and it's because of this that living entities have that capacity of vision. Because the sun entered into the eyes of the universal form of the Lord. So, and there's another description. When there was a manifestation of skin, so the universal form of the Lord has skin. When this manifestation of skin separated from the gigantic form, Anila, the deity directing the wind, entered with partial touch. And thus, the living entities can realize perfect knowledge. So you get knowledge of what you touch, tactile knowledge. This page is very, very smooth. The keys of my computer, well, they've got some smoothness, but there's little interruptions in the smoothness. That capacity to perceive in that tactile way, to have that knowledge coming from the tactile capacity, that's because of the presence of Lord Anila. He's giving that capacity. So this is all from, you really have to expand your intelligence. So in continuing this expansion of himself, Lord Krishna also states, and this is Bhagavad Gita 15:14, where he says, everywhere, so this is referring to Paramatma, that's Supreme Lord. So we're hearing about the gigantic form of the Lord and how the Lord's even manifesting himself as those demigods with those particular capacities. So here's a description of Paramatma. Everywhere are his hands and legs, his eyes, heads and faces, and he has his ears everywhere. In this way, the super soul exists, pervading everything. So he's got eyes, ears, hands, legs, and he's existing everywhere. But of course, we're hearing that he's localized within one's own body, but actually it's everywhere, within every body, every living entity. Within the atom, even the microscopic particles that we can't see have the presence of the super soul, who's got hands and legs and eyes and ears. So that's Bhagavad Gita 15. 15. So he is pervading everything. He exists in his all-pervading form, and in him exist all the individual living entities. So not only is he localized, but within him are existing all the living entities. So that's why the super soul is considered all-pervading. So it's quite a concept. So in terms of the worship of the Lord, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti explains by breaking down a particular word, and that word is kurpadrisha. We read it in the text. So the literal translation is having eyes clouded by dust. So now we're turning our attention to how persons can come to realize the presence of these particular demigods, and particularly of the presence of the super soul within their own bodies. So this word kurpadrishi, eyes clouded with dust, refers to those of the sampradaya of sages who limit their meditation to the form of the Lord present in the abdomen. So there's some sages, there's a particular sampradaya, they're focusing on trying to understand the presence of the Lord, Vaishvanara, within the stomach area. And that word that was used there, realization, he says that their eyes are clouded a little bit with dust because they're only looking at that particular manifestation of the Lord, or his being in the form of a demigod, or his having created the demigod for managing the abdomen, or the functioning of the abdomen, giving that Kriya Shakti. And that particular philosophy is understood through the sampradaya. So there's a sampradaya that actually understands this presence of Vaishvanara, Lord Vaishvanara in the abdomen area. And in the Padma Purana, there's a statement that says that philosophy is understood through the sampradaya. So that particular statement is sampradaya vina ye mantraste nishvala. So Srila Vishwanath states, those sages worship the Lord in the abdomen with the vision of later approaching the more subtle heart regions. Their philosophy tells them that if they do that meditation, later on they're going to actually be able to perceive the Lord in the heart, because it's a much more subtle presence. So this latter understanding of the philosophy followed would have the word, which was the word krupa, means subtle or acute vision. So their philosophy tells them that they can develop even more subtle vision, that they can perceive the Lord in the heart. So there's a confirmation of the Lord in the abdomen. Lord Krishna himself says that he's in the abdomen. This is how he puts it. I am the fire of digestion in the bodies of all living entities, and I join with the air of life, outgoing and incoming, to digest the four kinds of foodstuff. So that's how digestion is going on. Lord Krishna says, I'm the fire of digestion in the bodies of all living entities, and I join with the air of the outgoing and incoming to digest the four kinds of foodstuffs. So he's working with the pranic elements. So the living entity is dependent on the Lord, since he helps the digestion of all foodstuffs. So if one's suffering, one knows that one needs the help of the Lord. Without this help in digesting, there's actually no possibility of eating. So you can't eat if you know that you're not going to be able to digest. And and this refers to whichever of the four kinds of foodstuffs, and there are four kinds: that which is swallowed, that which is chewed, that which is licked, and that which is sucked. So there are four kinds of foodstuffs. So it doesn't matter which one is partaking of; it still requires the help from the Lord to digest those foodstuffs. So Srila Prabhupada, he outlines 5 different types of consciousness. So this is just in relation to this, developing a particular understanding of the presence, either of the very subtle presence of the Supreme Lord in the heart, or the perhaps less subtle understanding of the presence of the different demigods who the Lord has manifested anyway in each of the particular chakras or areas. So it requires a certain consciousness to start to come to an understanding of the presence of the Lord in these ways. So Srila Prabhupada outlines that there are 5 kinds of consciousness. So the first stage of consciousness is that of having the goal to eat sumptuously. So your consciousness is all about you want to eat well. And or you get satisfied by getting nice food. So you can see children screaming when they're hungry. And then when they get food, they're perfectly happy. So this is the first kind of consciousness. And of course, it may also be in adults too, that that's the only kind of consciousness where you come to understand that actually you're reliant on food stuff. And you actually have the consciousness to want to enjoy eating well. So this is called anamaya, this kind of consciousness. And there's a second type of consciousness, which is the consciousness of being alive. So this kind of consciousness, one starts to be very conscious of the fact that one is living. So one is actually very happy and grateful that one isn't being attacked or that one isn't being destroyed. So just thinking I'm alive creates happiness. So this is a certain kind of consciousness, your awareness of being alive. So this is pranamaya, your happiness at just being alive. So you're conscious of your existence. Then there's a third type of consciousness, which is that of being on the mental platform. So, often you find persons who are very, very much on the mental platform. So this is called manomaya. So it means that they're thinking a lot, this, that, the other. These 3 stages of consciousness can also mark a whole civilization, Srila Prabhupada says, that is materialistic. Because, you're thinking about eating, being alive, defending yourself, and just being on a very mental level. So you're not actually referring to spiritually realized knowledge. You're just using your mind to try and work out things. So Srila Prabhupada explains that by the evolutionary process of philosophical life, one may reach a platform of intellectual life. So, so not that one stays in a civilization that's just concerned with economic development, or a civilization that's concerned about not being attacked, or a civilization that's just focused on mental speculation, but one actually, regarding the philosophical values of life, but one actually evolves to come to philosophical life. So it means, the intellect has been utilized. Who am I? What am I doing here? What is my purpose? So one may reach that kind of platform and come to the understanding then that actually one isn't this material body. One doesn't have to be thinking just about feeding oneself because one's identifying with the body. One doesn't have to just be thinking, oh, I'm alive, just thinking of the body. But one can come to the understanding that actually there's a soul that's animating the body. And then that person is said to be situated in a different kind of consciousness, and that's called Vijnanamaya, the Vijnanamaya stage of consciousness, because you're getting realization of your identity as the soul within the body. So by this kind of evolution in spiritual life, one comes to an understanding of the Supreme Lord as the Supreme Soul that's residing alongside the individual soul within the body. And Srila Vishwanath states that the superior yogis, so we just heard about these, that their sampradaya teaches them that they can meditate on the Lord Vaishvanara within the stomach area. Srila Vishwanath says there's a superior category of yogis known as the Arunis, and they worship the super soul in his form as the indwelling companion of the individual soul, the jiva in the heart. So the Arunis do that. So this is the Lord who bestows, this Lord in the heart, the super soul, is the Lord that bestows Jnana Shakti, the power of knowledge. That's what comes about through meditation on the super soul. He is providing, just like Lord Vaishvanara gives the Kripa Shakti, or the Kriya Shakti, the power to digest. So the super soul gives Jnana Shakti, the power of knowledge, and inspires one with the varieties of practical intelligence. So the intelligence is very practical too. So not only is it intellectual knowledge, but there's also practical intelligence that's provided by the super soul. So very interesting, this Jnana Shakti. So he points out that the Lord in the heart is very subtle and difficult to perceive. And the word that in the text that we read was daharan, very difficult to perceive. So there's an understanding that's given by Lord Krishna just to get a grasp on how difficult it is to perceive the super soul. So this is Lord Krishna's description of the super soul, Bhagavad Gita 13:14. The super soul is the original source of all senses. We heard a little bit that because I read how in the third canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, the gigantic form of the Lord is manifesting senses, and then he's also manifesting the demigods who enter and give the functioning of the senses or oversee the functioning of the senses. So here's Krishna saying the super soul is the original source of all senses, yet he is without senses. He's unattached, although he's the maintainer of all living beings. He transcends the modes of nature, and at the same time, he's the source of all the modes of material nature. So quite, unusual. How are you going to actually understand this very subtle entity? He doesn't have senses. He's unattached. He transcends the modes of nature. And at the same time, he's the source of the modes of nature. Very difficult to understand. I'll read the Sanskrit. Sarvendriya gunabhasam, sarvendriya vivaritam, asakritam sarvam bre naiva nirgunam guna bhaktir cha. So the Supreme Lord does not have senses, it says, but they're not like the senses of the living entities. Although the living entities as individual souls do have spiritual senses too, but that comes with the knowledge that's given by the presence of the super soul, and as one's actually receiving this Jnana Shakti through worship and meditation. But these senses are covered, our general senses are covered with material elements. And so the sense activities take place or are shown through matter. We have to look at something. So I'm examining this arm of the microphone, or I'm examining this functional part of the microphone within which the voice is being captured. So my eyes are being utilized, interacting with material elements. So the senses of the super soul, however, are transcendental So it said they're nirvana without the influence of material covering. So they don't have to focus on something physical or material. They can actually perceive and comprehend already, transcendental senses. And although the supersoul is the source of our senses, he's not made impure. So you would think that if he's actually that original source and he's created the demigods that oversee and give the power to utilize the particular senses, and the senses need to interact with something material, that therefore the Lord might in some way also get a little bit contaminated by this action, but actually he's not made impure in any way. So of particular interest is the fact that the heart is the place from which the nadis, the numerous channels of prana, because there's life energy, prana, throughout the body, and these channels, they come from a particular points within the heart called nadis, and they extend outwards to all parts of the body. So the prana extends to all different parts of the body. And the Shrutis, they are speaking, and this is Srila Vishwanath giving their words, and this is what they say. Oh, Ananda, the soul rises up towards the head, the effulgent location where you, the Paramatma, are perceived. So one can perceive the presence of the Paramatma through the prana that's traveled to the top of the head. Like recently, I was with an Ayurvedic physician, and she said to me afterwards, because she had to touch various marma points, she said that, oh, in your case, the opening at the top of the head is so open, so one day you're just going to burst out of there. So I was delighted to hear this, because this is where the yogis that are trying to meditate on the Paramatma, this is where there's the effulgent location of the Paramatma that can be perceived. So somebody like an Ayurvedic practitioner who's working with prana can perceive, oh, this opening is very open. So, yeah. So the explanation is as follows. So beginning from the Muladhara chakra and passing through the heart, the soul rises up to the Brahma Rudra chakra, the topmost chakra, at the roof of the brain. In actual fact, the place of the super soul appears in all three of these locations, all three of these chakras. But yogis who attain that topmost prana, understanding of that prana on the top of the head, they don't fall down again into the cycle of material existence. So if my Ayurvedic practitioner is correct, I will be so fortunate. It means that one won't fall down into the cycle of material existence again, if that's where the soul is exiting. And there was, in the text we read, it was Kritanta Mukhe Samsara. One doesn't fall down again to material existence. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he states, those whose vision is clouded identify Brahman with the abdomen, while the Arunis worship Brahman in the heart. And Srila Vishwanath notes that one who is Brahman realized travels upward from the heart to take shelter of the Lord, who's manifested at the top of the head. So these are the yogis who are specifically controlling the pranas, the life airs. So they are actually able to take their realization, their sort of management of the life air. They're traveling upward from the heart to take shelter of the Lord, who's manifested at the top of the head. Because they're just doing a physiological, you could say, process. It's very subtle. And these Aruni yogis, they're actually able to realize the Lord who's manifested at the top of the head. So traveling upwards from the heart. So Srila Prabhupada states that great sages recommend meditation on the bodily concept of life. So there's sampradayas who do that. So there's meditation on the intestines. There's meditation on the heart, on the throat, on the eyebrows, on the forehead, and then on top of the head. So imagine some sampradayas are putting focus on specific areas of the body, and they're great sages. And it's recommended that they practice this kind of meditation on the bodily concepts of life. And Srila Prabhupada says that some of the sages from the disciplic section of the Arunis, they meditate on the heart because the super soul stays within the heart along with the living entity. And Lord Krishna says this too, I'm situated within everyone's heart. So Srila Prabhupada notes that Krishna is actually present everywhere, and that Vaishnavas therefore mark the body with temples of Vishnu. So that's what the Vaishnavas do. They're not meditating on the presence of the Lord in the different chakras and managing the prana and controlling the prana, then realizing the Lord at the top of the head. The Vaishnavas are acknowledging that different parts of the bodies are temples of Lord Vishnu. So that's why we mark the abdomen, the chest, the collarbone, the forehead. And eventually the Brahma Rudra, one wipes one's tilak, the Brahma Rudra. So Vaishnavas protect the body for the service of the Lord, but gross materialists, they accept the body as the self. So different emphasis. The body as the self, so you're meditating on the prana and the different chakras and trying to manage the prana, and realizing the Lord through the control of that prana, but they're still seeing the body as the self. But Vaishnavas, they're actually protecting the body, understanding that it's being used for the service of the Lord. So these persons that the Shrutis are referring to, they worship the body by the yogic process of meditation on the different bodily parts. And the final point, which is of interest, is that there's subtle pranic channels emanating from the heart. And one of these, the susumna, extends to the top of the head. And by passing up through this channel, one transcends death. So the other channels lead in all directions to various kinds of death. But this particular channel that extends to the top of the head, if the soul passes through that, one transcends death. So that was the final point in what the Shrutis had to say. So this was an examination of today's verses. If there's any question, any thought, any expansion of the discussion, although it's run a little late because it was a little long, the particular verse. But thank you very much for your attention. Thank you. Sorry, it was a little long. If there's any last comment, we can end. Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.